we always had that same schedule where you would peak on the day you were putting the paper together,
Right.
and then it would come out the next day, and then you could relax for a couple of days. Now it's more relentless than that. The news doesn't stop, and with our digital focus, we've got to keep up.
We're rolling.
Rolling.
Hi, Brian.
Been rolling for a long time now.
We sure have been. I thought today we might talk about the past and the future of journalism in Ulster County, our journalism and journalism in general.
Sure.
And who better but our local historian, yourself. Yeah, I guess you've become a journalism historian.
Well, you can't be a historian until you're at least 70.
That's right. Okay.
So we've crossed that Rubicon.
Okay.
And we can genuinely call ourselves, well, now it's 50 years that Woodstock Times has been on the newsstands.
Yep.
Now it's Hudson Valley 1, of course. But in those 50 years, there's a lot of events that have been covered, and a lot of glue has been applied to the community by Woodstock Times.
Yeah. And our other publications. I am quite proud of what we managed to accomplish in terms of the other papers as well, and the Ulster Magazine, the Almanac, and all the things that we did.
And even as I mentioned it in the piece that we ran in Hudson Valley 1, the short-lived newspaper in Key West, Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. I spent several months in Berkeley doing a paper, and then Key West. That's probably right. Years. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I went down there quite a bit.
Yeah.
It's a great place. Now, I also think that we're in a different time right now, that we're entering a digital age, and have been entering it for some time now. So it's changed journalism completely.
Well, it certainly changed our schedules around a lot in terms of how we present the news. We've always done it. In the 19 years that I've been here, 20, working on the 20th now, we always had that same schedule where you would peak on the day you were putting the paper together,
right.
And then it would come out the next day, and then you could relax for a couple of days. Now it's more relentless than that. The news doesn't stop, and with our digital focus, we've got to keep up.
Yeah. Well, it's not only the famous news desert thing where publications are being suspended and stopping all over the country, but also the future. What will the digital future be like? Because I know in Ulster County right now, it seems to me that there are probably half a dozen, maybe more. There are more than competitors in the broader sense, including the digital folks doing digital work.
Right. There are more competitors out there. Few of them are actually printing newspapers, which is the vinyl records of the news business.
Right.
We've still got a considerable audience for newspapers, but the focus has to be on getting the news out there every day.
Well, unless someone comes up with a better formula, as you have to be a giant paper in order to remain newspaper or paper oriented rather than digital oriented.
Right.
I noticed the New York Times is now up to 9 million subscriptions of various kinds.
Right.
So that's a pretty impressive number, but we in Ulster County can't do something like that. We don't, for instance, we don't have 2,000 reporters.
Right. Right. You need the expense. The news grows and the expense grows.
Yeah. So what do we do now if we have 10 papers with 2 reporters or 1 reporter each rather than 1 paper with 10 reporters? It's a different kind of world. It's competition is different. There's fewer opportunities for depth very often.
Yes and no. Yes and no. You've got to be able to handle the flow of it coming through each day, and if you've got the right people in place, you can make sure that you handle it as it comes through.
Well, how can you get depth when you have this constant need to feed the beast?
It gets shorter.
It gets shorter. Okay, well, shorter.
It gets shorter. You have to be more concise.
Right.
You have to be able to handle the flow that comes from all of the digital sources that you now have. You've got additional sources coming through. You get a ton of stuff coming through on your computer. All of what was once stacks of paper coming through and mail that you had to open each day by hand now comes through on digital sources. I was looking through compiling some of the oddities that you see coming through on the web, and talking about the things that you get from Wallet Hub, surveys about how many drinks New Yorkers take every week, surveys about the more difficult states where mortgage rates are higher, or where it's harder to get jobs and people have to struggle more, and you kind of aggregate all of this material through, filter it through an editorial knowledge, and somehow find a way to present it in a way that's concise and clear that people can see it on their phones.
Well, most of what you get, including, which cities are the most humid rankings and stuff like
right.
that. A lot of the information is unreliable. That is, if you look at, say, even the census stuff, where they get all kinds of new kinds of data, and you look at it, and it doesn't make sense. It doesn't hold water in a journal, in a social science sense. It just the stuff is superficial and sort of spread out all over the place, and doesn't contribute anything to a deeper knowledge of anything.
No, you got to filter it through your editorial experience, and you hope that you have enough experience in your news organization to be able to separate the wheat from the chaff.
Well, one characteristic, I think, is if things are, in a sense, the more fragmented, you get more press releases from the various people who naturally want to toot their own horn. They want to. There are very few organizations that put out releases that are negative about themselves.
Right.
So you have to kind of filter that very carefully, and a lot of what comes out is doesn't do that. Like I was looking at not last night at the State of the County, Pat Ryan,
mm-hmm. Yes.
And I thought, well, the 4 main things he's talking about: economic development, housing, drugs, and people, the whole opioid thing, and the green economy. Now there are four things, and I bet you that none of the 10 or 15 outlets that there are give justice to what he's saying, take issue with it or anything, because it's 10 paragraphs long or 15 paragraphs long. Mm-hmm. Well, if you don't have a media which can absorb 15 paragraphs and make some sense of it, you're in pretty sad shape, and I think that we are.
Well, it's the voracious nature of the beast that you got to keep feeding it.
Yep.
And it's very easy to take what somebody else puts out as a news release, and this has always been true.
Yep.
Without having to sit down and rewrite it or take out the gratuitous bullshit that's in it, and make sure that you have some kind of meat on the bones there, that you're understanding what they're talking about. Otherwise, you fall into the trap of putting out information that may be dubious, that may not be researched fully, that might be misleading, or that toots somebody's horn.
Yeah. Well, when your organization consists of two people, it's very hard to do that. I noticed
you and me, Geddy.
There's well, I think more than that, but the prevalence of very small organizations and the nature of the beast leads to a particular simplification that isn't journalism anymore.
Right. It does. It's you just got to keep plugging.
Yeah.
You got to keep plugging. You got to keep looking at it and thinking about it, and then get it out there fast.
Well, this system and the hierarchy involves moi, the publisher, and the various other departments, and the editorial, which is basically Deb, Alexa, and you, and me occasionally.
Yes. Well, you're in there.
And then the writers.
Yep.
And columnists and what have you.
Yeah.
That's the system. So when you try to say to them both, make sure you feed the beast, and secondly, with your other hand, do something in real depth, do something that tells you something about the community, or some part of it. It's a hard sell.
And then on the third hand, you have to do it within a budget somewhere along the line.
That's right.
Otherwise, you can't keep putting it out.
Yeah. Well, the budget is, when you have small organizations, you have small budgets. When you have small budgets, you have small insights.
Yes. Yeah. Well, you do what you can. Should we show them number one?
Sure.
This was Volume 1, Number 1, February 7th, 1972. The gentleman to my left here, who's the host of this show, was the editor of this particular newspaper, and has been involved in every issue, more or less, since then. Woodstock must have a sewer system. Well, that went on for quite some time, didn't it?
Oh, well, they got a sewer system.
They got the sewer system.
I guess within 2 or 4 years of that, right?
About
or longer.
It took longer. It took most of a decade to actually get it built, and then it took another decade to figure out how to pay for it.
Yeah.
So it was an issue that graced number 1 here, Volume 1, Number 1, and was in the newspaper for the next 20 years.
Oh. Well, but sewer and water issues are still with us.
They are still with us and will be with us for a long time. They're still talking about critical water areas, aquifer areas in Woodstock, and the possibility of designating something to be that, and what that might mean. And those are critical areas for every area, critical issues for every area. New Paltz has water issues. They're talking about extending the water district up to North Putt Corners Road and having a development, commercial development up that way. Even though it's out of the village, it's still the village's water system.
Yeah.
So, everywhere you go, you see it with pipes, lead pipes in New Jersey now, and contaminated water in different places. So it's a big issue. It's always been, and it'll continue along that way.
Well, if you don't have a staff large enough to focus on those issues, if you're sending them to town board meetings and stuff where the same thing happens over and over again, that's you're not going to really get to the heart or the nub of some of the big money questions involved in water and sewer.
Right. Well, this is the discussion that we have all the time.
All the time.
Do you go out there and cover every town board meeting and talk about the minutia that goes on there, or how do you filter it through, and how do you get to the real issues that need to be covered without going to every meeting, because then you're using precious manpower or reporter power to get there, and when it could be, how do you get them to focus on the right things that come from there, because there's a lot of stuff in there that doesn't need to be covered but ends up getting covered.
What do you think of the right things for Woodstock right now?
Well, the right things for Woodstock right now are the same things that have always been in the news. There, you're talking about. You want to talk about the environment. People are talking about clear-cutting trees in different areas. They talk about the water issues. They talk about zoning and making sure that there's enough affordable housing, and they're typical issues everywhere. Woodstockers find a very peculiar, tenacious way to argue about these things that keep them in the news for a long time. Mm-hmm. So you've got to stay on top of it and still filter out the things and still have enough community flavor. We've had people are sorry that they're missing their one community newspaper, but your goal is still to try and get community flavor within the Hudson Valley 1 format, which covers a much wider area than just Woodstock. Now we're trying to cover Saugerties and Kingston and New Paltz, which we previously covered with their own newspapers. So they're all condensed into one now, and the goal is to have that community flavor be wider than just one particular town. Does the Hudson Valley have its own character? What is the Ulster County character? Ulster County's a different ball of wax than Sullivan and Delaware and Greene counties and Dutchess County. It's a much more liberal, left-oriented area. The demographics have changed so much over the years.
Right. When you talk about community flavor, it reminds me of Lifesavers. If you, as I remember them, there are 5 different colors, or 4 different colors
something
of Lifesavers,
like that,
something like that. And then, so there's the individual Lifesavers, that is the individual flavors, and there's also the package. You buy them, you may prefer lemon, but you have to have strawberry as well.
Yeah, and they don't taste bad going down. You know, I look at Hudson Valley 1, where we're dealing with all the communities, and I see a distinct flavor, distinct layers of different flavors that come through, but it all lends itself to a specific character that seems to
Well, they all have character.
Yeah.
They're various. Each has its own flavor, but they all exhibit or exude character and community sense. I mean, Saugerties continues to be as different from Woodstock as it always has been, but I think its community flavor has not diminished.
Yeah, it hasn't. We're trying to get people from Saugerties to be able to read news from Woodstock and to be able to read news from Kingston.
Sure. Well,
it all pertains. People come to Kingston to shop. People go to different places. They go to Woodstock for entertainment, or at least when COVID isn't around. You go to Saugerties for a lot of different things, for sporting events, for shoes, for.
So that brings us, I guess, to the COVID remark. Brings us to how close do you think we are to so-called normality, and how different will tomorrow's normal be from yesterday's?
Well, those are pretty hard questions. When you think of it, I'm still, like a lot of people, taking it day by day, looking at the numbers, still wearing a mask when I go into indoor places. I'm not quite ready to go out with my band and play in an indoor space, enclosed space. And I'm just watching it daily as it goes by. It's a difficult thing to call. You know, you think you're past the peak of it, and then a new variant pops up.
Well, do you have any intuitions? Do you think that we're entering something that'll be so different that we can't even characterize it, or will it have the elements of familiar and unfamiliar, only you're not quite sure how it will sort out?
Yes.
Yeah, the latter. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much for coming by today. Appreciate it, Brian. And wonderful talking to you. We've had, I think, a number of conversations over the last 20 or 30 years, haven't we?
Quite a bit, quite a few, and I'm hoping that they're going to continue for
I hope so,
a long time.
Good. Thank you.
Long time. Thanks.